Is this also a Christian group?
I don't believe that profanity has anything to do with Christianity. Thank you.
That, it's just an interesting choice, because I was getting the impression from your presentation that you were a very wholesome kind of performer, and that is an interesting title for your fan club. In Surge, you say your song, Under the Blade, is about surgery. Have you ever had surgery with your hands tied and your legs strapped?
The song was written about my guitar player, Eddie Ojeda. He was having polyps removed from his throat, and he was very fearful of this operation. And I said, Eddie, while you're in the hospital, I'm going to write a song for you. I said it was about the fear of operations. I think people imagine being helpless on a table, a bright light in their face, the blade coming down on them, and having totally afraid that they may wake up, who knows, dead, handicapped. There's a certain fear of hospitals. That's in my imagination what I see the hospitals like.
Is there a reference to the hospital in the song?
No, there isn't, but there isn't a reference to a woman, sadomasochism, or bondage, yes, I'm sorry.
There's just a reference to someone whose hands are tied down and whose legs are strapped down, and he's going under the blade to be cut.
Yes, there is.
All right. So it's not really a wild leap of the imagination to jump to the conclusion that that's about something other than surgery or hospitals, neither of which are mentioned in the song.
No, it's not a wild jump, and I think what I said in one part was that songs allow a person to put their own imagination, experiences, and dreams into the lyrics. People can interpret it many ways. Ms. Gore was looking for sadomasochism and bondage, and she found it. Someone looking for surgical references would have found it as well.
Yeah. Why do you think there is so much sadomasochism and bondage in some of these new songs?
I cannot speak for the other artists. I can really am only here to defend myself, and hopefully by speaking for myself as one person, songwriter in a band that I feel has been unjustly dumped on, that will just warn us of the dangers of what we're trying to do here. I really can't speak for the other bands.
Now, you made reference to a comment about T-shirts. I would simply note for the record that the word T-shirts was in plural, and one of them referred to a twisted sister, and the other referred to a woman in handcuffs, and was not intended, as I understand it, to say that you appear with a woman in handcuffs. In fact, there are a lot of different T-shirts and advertisements. In fact, I've noticed from some of the fan magazines of particularly heavy metal that little sadomasochistic outfits are advertised with the fingerless gloves and spikes and studs on them, and that these little S&M outfits are marketed to teens and preteens. Is that correct?
Well, they are marketed. Who buys them, I'm not sure. I'd just like to say, in reference to the comment about T-shirts, I have with me a taped cassette of the exact...
No, I'm reading from your transcript of it in your statement.
I have to check the transcript, but again, I'll say when it was said, there was no question she was referring to a Twisted Sister T-shirt. There was no question if I played the tape for anybody.
In your own transcript, it's plural T-shirts, and two examples are cited, but I don't want to belabor that point. Now, you said that you can look at the titles of albums and look at the covers and tell what kind of material is inside. Does the title Purple Rain give you an indication that the material is about masturbation?
Do you mean the album title, Purple Rain, not the song title? Yeah. No, it doesn't. I didn't say in all cases. I believe I covered that, those occasional albums that are a bit misleading. That, like I said, I don't think a store would refuse a parent who came in and said, I don't like what's on this record, I would like my money back.
So the choice the parent has, then, is to sit down and listen to every song on the album, right?
Or read the lyrics if they're on the record.
What if they're not on the I mean, I think there's pretty general agreement that if the lyrics are printed, that's one possible solution for this. Let's suppose the lyrics aren't printed. Then what choice does a parent have? To sit down and listen to every song on the album?
Well, if they're really concerned about it, I think that they have to.
Do you think that's reasonable to expect parents to do that?
Being a parent isn't a reasonable thing. It's a very hard thing. I'm a parent and I know. Okay, I'm a new parent. I only have one child maybe, but I am learning that there's a lot to being a parent that you didn't expect. It's not just, oh, isn't baby cute? There's a lot of labor and a lot of time and a lot of effort that goes into it. It's not totally pleasurable.
Yeah, and you'll find when they get a little bit older that when they're exposed to the kinds of themes that we were presented with earlier, that if you love your child, you're going to be concerned about that. And if you want to protect that child from unnecessary exposure to inappropriate material, you sometimes need a little help, the kind of guidance that is presented in the movie industry. And it is totally unreasonable, in my view, to expect parents to come and sit down and listen to every single song in the albums that their children buy in order to fulfill their responsibilities as parents. Now, the only thing that I felt at all comfortable about in your statement was when you said that you shared some of the concerns of the PMRC. I would simply hope that, or end by expressing the hope, because my time has expired, that artists and record companies will find a way to manifest that concern in some self-restraint and show of responsibility to give parents a break. You're right, it's tough being a parent. It's even tougher being a kid. If both are going to be able to deal with the kind of material that's coming out in popular music, it seems to me the industry has a responsibility to give them a little help. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rockefeller.
Mr. Snider, how would you, do you feel that you have a responsibility as an artist in terms of those words that you write, a responsibility for those who would hear those words?
I feel a tremendous responsibility, and as I said, I don't put anything down on a record that I can't stand behind in my beliefs 100%. I don't sing about drugs, sex, alcohol, because I don't advocate sexism, the use of drugs, and drinking. So I don't write about those things. I only write about things I believe in.
And that's the way you define what your responsibility is? That is, not to write about things that you don't believe in?
Yeah, that's how I define my responsibility. To write about things that you can stand behind. I feel myself to be a moral person, and I think that I have a lot of positive things to tell people about. And everything, like I said, on my records, I will stand there and say, yes, I wrote those words, and this is what it meant, and this is what I was trying to say, yes.
Do you think that, parents, not only those who are in PMRC, but other parents who are concerned here and across the country about the development of new trends in music and the lyrics that go along with that music are naive or somehow missing the point? Do you think that they're unduly worried about some of the developments and writings about sadomasochism, suicide, rape, other things? I mean, do you think that's really not that serious a problem for this country and our young people?
That's like sort of a multiple question. I don't think they're naive, and I don't think that at times they're unduly worried, but I do think sometimes they take it overly serious. I mean, there are monster movies on all the time. They've been going on for ages, and people watch a monster movie and they get scared and they walk away, and it was just a movie. Rock and roll, in many times, is the same thing, trying to get an effect either of laughter, of sadness. A lot of the heavy metal bands are trying to scare people and just make them just like a horror movie. Vincent Price isn't getting have problems because he's done all these monster pictures. He's just an actor. I'm not going to say I'm just an actor, but I am entertaining people, and a lot of these bands are entertaining people. And when they were reading some of these lyrics before, I couldn't help but laugh. I mean, I hadn't heard some of them, but some of the lyrics ridiculously ridiculous. I mean, you know, and a kid, even a kid reading that, I think would go, oh my God, what's going on? You know, it's ridiculous, the only word I can think of, some of the lyrics.
In the vehemence with which you attacked Senator Gore's wife, I detected sort of a defensiveness somehow on your part, sort of a lack of unsureness of where you stand in this. Why did you feel it necessary to attribute some of the qualities to her that you did? Why was that important to your testimony?
First of all, I wasn't attacking Senator Gore's wife. I was attacking a member of the PMRC. Okay,
Senator Gore's wife by name.
Oh, her name is Tipper Gore, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't say the senator's wife. I said Tipper Gore, okay? Secondly, defensive. I've been working very hard. I believe in the music I play. I believe we have a very bad reputation, and I've been doing a lot on my part to try and say, hey, this isn't a bad thing. This is fun. This is fantasy. Kids are coming out. They're screaming. They're yelling. They're letting out their emotions, and they're going home, and they're feeling better because they let out a lot of their frustrations. As I said, I pride myself on writing lyrics that are not offensive and that are saying something positive. Most of my songs are about personal freedom. And when somebody tells me, after all I've done to fight against sexism, that I've got a shirt with a spread eagle woman, or it says...
To fight what?
All I've done to fight sexism. We steer clear. The whole Twisted Sister thing is a very ambiguous. Guys wearing makeup, we don't act like women, we act like men. We don't cater to the males or females in the audience. It's just one audience. So when someone says there's a song about sadomasochism and bondage, or someone says we're not going to take it, is violent lyrical content, which is what it's been rated for, yes, I'm defensive. Yes, that gets me angry. I'm trying to get adults to see that heavy metal is not totally a bad thing.
How many months in the course of a year do you spend on the road, away from home?
In the course of a year, it would be tough to say. Over a 2-year period, because I would spend about 11 months on the road and 13 months at home recording an album, things like that, doing videos.
11 months on the road in a 2-year period?
Yeah, because you do a tour and then you go in and record albums. I've been off the road now for 10 months.
You take your child with you?
He comes sometimes. Some of the shows.
Your child, 9 years from now, when your child is 12 and in school, will you take your child with you?
Absolutely.
When your child's in school?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying. No, I would not take him out of school.
And how will it be possible for you to, as a responsible parent, to spend the time that you suggest going through and listening to these records and finding out what it is that you want your son to listen to and what you don't want him to listen to?
To be perfectly honest, 9 years from now, I'm going to be well retired. And I'll be spending more time with my son than any other parent probably ever spends. That's one of the beautiful things about rock and roll, is that I can retire hopefully at a very early age. But even now, I'm very lucky that I have a wife who I've been going with for 10 years now. We've been married for 4, who is this incredible mother. And she, when I'm gone, fills the role, has a very difficult job too, of mother and father.
Does she go through these, do you expect later on then that she'll be going through these records?
I think both of us will be doing that.
You expect me to believe that?
Oh, you can. I'm terminally teenage. I'll be listening to my son's records. And
what about parents where both parents have to work, which is an increasing phenomenon in this country now, because they have to survive? And the whole notion of parents sitting down and listening to record after record, tape after tape, doesn't that really strike you, and that's what you suggested, doesn't that strike you as just a little bit naive and unrealistic?
No, I don't, because I know the reality of the record buying market. As a record buyer, with my allowance, I was able to, if I was lucky, afford maybe 1 album a week at the most. Usually it was 1 a month. Albums cost anywhere from $6 to $10, and that's a lot of money to a teenager, to a pre-teenage. It's a ridiculous sum. To a teenage kid, you know, that's a considerable amount of money. So to listen to 1 record a week, I don't consider that a hardship.
Senator Pressler? Just one final question, Mr. Chairman.
Bearing in mind that it's 12:30 and we have a lot of witnesses left, yes.
Well, then I won't ask the question. I'll bear that in mind and won't ask the question.
Thank you. Senator Pressler?
I'm a parent. I've got 4 children. 2 of them are here. I want them to grow up in a country where they can think what they want to think, be what they want to be, and not what somebody's wife or somebody in government makes them be. I don't want to have that, and I don't think you do either.
Okay, but now you're back on the you're back on the other issue, and let me just say briefly on that they say repeatedly no legislation, no regulation, no government action. Certainly sounded pretty clear to me, and
Okay.
as far as a hidden agenda, you know, I don't see one, hear one, or know of one.
Okay, let me tell you why I've drawn these conclusions. First of all, they may say we are not interested in legislation, but there are others who do, and because of their project, bad things have happened in this country, in the industry. I believe there is actually some liability. Look at this. You have a situation where even if you go for the lyric printed thing in the record, because of the tendency among Americans to be copycats, one guy commits a murder, you get a copycat murder, now you got copycat censors. You've got a very bad situation in San Antonio, Texas right now, where they're trying to pass PMRC type individual ratings and attach them to live concerts, with the mayor down there trying to make a national reputation by putting San Antonio on the map as the first city in the United States to have these regulations, against the suggestion of the city attorney who says, I don't think this is constitutional. But, you know, there's this fervor to get in and do even more, even more. And the other thing, that if the PMRC starts off talking about lyrics, but when they take it over into other realms, when they start talking about the videos, in fact, you misspoke yourself at the beginning in your introduction when you were talking about the music does this, the music does that. There is a distinct difference between those notes and the chords and the bass line and the rhythm that supports the words and the lyrics. I don't know whether you really are talking about controlling the type of music that kids hear. So just specifically, we're talking about lyrics. It began with lyrics, but even looking at the PMRC fundraising letter in the last paragraph at the bottom of the page, it starts looking like it's branching into other areas when it says, we realize that this material has pervaded other aspects of society, and it's like, what, you're going to fix it all for me?
No, I think what they're, I think they're acknowledging some of the statements by some of their critics who say, well, why single out the music industry? But if I could have just half a minute more, Mr. Chairman. Before we got back into that stuff, you were saying, yes, you do believe that there is a legitimate concern.
Yeah, but the legitimate concern is a matter of taste on for the individual parent and how much sexual information that parent wants to give their child at what age, at what time, in what quantity, okay? And I think that because there is a tendency in the United States to hide sex, which I think is an unhealthy thing to do, and many parents do not give their children good sexual education in spite of the fact that little books for kids are available, and other parents demand that sexual education be taken out of school, it makes the child vulnerable, because if you don't have something rational to compare it to, when you see or hear about something that is aberrated, you do not perceive it as an aberration. Okay?
Okay, I've run out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rockefeller. Senator Gordon.
Mr. Zappa, I am astounded at the courtesy and soft-voiced nature of the comments of my friend, the senator from Tennessee. I can only say that I found your statement to be boorish, incredibly and insensitively insulting to the people who were here previously, that you could manage to give the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States a bad name if I felt that you had the slightest understanding of it, which I do not. You don't have the slightest understanding of the difference between government action and private action. And you have certainly destroyed any case you might otherwise have had with this senator. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is this private action?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. So let me say that I was surprised Senator Gore knew and liked your music. I must confess that I never heard any of your music to my knowledge.
I would be more than happy to recite my lyrics to you.
Can we forego that?
You probably never heard of the Mothers of Invention.
I have heard of Glenn Miller and Mitch Miller. Did you ever perform with them?
As a matter of fact, I took music lessons in grade school from Mitch Miller's brother.
That's the first sign of hope we've had in this neighborhood. Let's try and get down to a fundamental question here that I'd like to ask you, Mr. Zappa. Do you believe that parents have the right and the obligation to mold the psychological development of their children?
Yeah, I think they have that right, and I also think they have that obligation.
Do you see any extreme difficulty in carrying out those obligations for a parent by material falling into the hands of their children over which they have little or no control?
Well, one of the things that has been brought up before is talking about very young children getting access to the material that they've been showing here today. And what I've said to that in the past is a teenager may go into a record store unescorted with $8.98 in his pocket, but very young children do not. If they go into a record store, the $8.98 is in mom's pocket or dad's pocket, and they can always say, Johnny, buy a book. They can say, Johnny, buy instrumental music. There's some nice classical music here for you. Why don't you listen to that? The parent can ask or guide the child in another direction, away from Sheena Easton, Prince, or whoever else you've been complaining about. There's always that possibility.
As I understand it from your testimony, and once again I want to emphasize that I see nothing wrong whatsoever. In fact, I salute the ladies for bringing this to the attention of the public as best they see fit, and I think you could tell from my testimony that I tend to agree with them, but I want to be very careful that we don't overstep our bounds and try and meet. I emphasize once again telling somebody else what they should see, so I'm primarily worried about children. It seems to me from your statement that you have no obligation or no objection whatsoever to printing lyrics, if that would be legally possible, or from a standpoint of having the room to do that on record or tapes. Isn't that what you said?
I think it would be advisable for two reasons. One, it gives people one of the things that they've been asking for. It gives them that type of consumer protection, because if you can read the English language and you can see the lyrics on the back, you have no excuse for complaint if you take the record out of the store. And also, I think that the record industry has been damaged, has been given a very bad rap by this whole situation, because it's been indicated, or people have attempted to indicate, that there is so much of this kind of material that people object to in the industry, that that's what the industry is. It is not that at all. Some of the albums that have been selected for abuse here are obscure. Some of them are already several years old. And I think that a lot of deep digging was done in order to come up with the song about the anal vapors, or whatever it was that they were talking about before.
So if I understand you, you would be in support of printing the lyrics, but you are adamantly opposed to any kind of a rating system. Is that correct?
I'm opposed to the rating system because, as I said, if you put a rating on the record, it goes directly to the character of the person who made the record. Whereas if you rate a film, a guy who is in the film has been hired as an actor, he's pretending. You rate the film, whatever it is, it doesn't hurt him. But whether you like what's on the record or not, the guy who made it, that's his art. And to stigmatize him is not fair.
Well, likewise, if you're primarily concerned about the artists, is it not true that for many, many years we have had ratings of movies with indications as to the sexual content of movies, and that has been, as near as I can tell, a voluntary action on the part of the actors in the movies and the producers of the movie and the distributors? That seems to have worked reasonably well. What is wrong with that?
Well, first of all, it replaced something that was far more restrictive, which was the Hayes office. And as far as that being voluntary, there are people who wish they did not have to rate their film. They still object to rating their films, but the reason the ratings go on is because if they're not rated, they won't get distributed or showed in theaters. So there is a little bit of pressure involved there. And, but still, there is no stigma on the person.
The government does not require that. That's what the point I'm trying to make is And while I think these hearings should not have been held if we're not considering legislation or regulations at this time, I emphasized earlier that they might follow. I simply want to say to you that I suspect that unless the industry, quote, cleans up their act, and I use that, end quote, word again, there's likely to be legislation. And it seems to me that it would not be too far removed from reality or too offensive to anyone if you could follow the general guidelines, right, wrong, or indifferent, that are now in place with regard to the movie industry.
Well, I would object to that. I think that, first of all, I believe it was you who asked the question of Mrs. Gore whether there was any other indication on the album as to the contents. And I would say that a buzzsaw blade between a guy's legs on the album cover is a good indication that it's not for little Johnny.
I don't believe I answered that question, but the point that you've made is a good one, because if that should not go to little mind, I think there should be at least some minimal activity or attempt on the part of the producers and the distributors, and indeed possibly the performers, to see that that does not get to that little mind. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Hawkins.
Mr. Zappa, I apologize for coming back in late, but I'm just hearing the latter part of it. I hear that you say that perhaps we could print the words, and I think that's a good suggestion. But it is unfair to have it rated. Now, it's not considered unfair in the movie industry, and I want you to elaborate. I don't want to belabor you, but why is it unfair? I mean, it's accurate, isn't it? I mean...
Well, I don't know whether it is accurate, because they sometimes have trouble deciding how a film gets to be an X or an R or whatever, and you have two problems. One is the quantity of material, 325 films per year versus 25,000 four-minute songs per year, okay? You also have the problem that an album is a compilation of different types of cuts. If one song on the album is sexually explicit and all the rest of it sounds like Pat Boone, what do you get on the album? How are you going to rate it? You know, there are little technical difficulties here. And also you have the problem of having somebody in the position of deciding what's good, what's bad, what's talking about the devil, what's too violent, and, you know, and the rest of that stuff. But the point that I've made before is that when you rate the album, you're rating the individual, because he takes personal responsibility for the music, and in the movies, the actors who are performing in the movie, it doesn't hurt them.
Well, very good. I think the actual printing of the content itself is perhaps even better than rating. Let everyone else decide for themselves.
I think you should leave it up to the parent, because not all parents want to keep their children totally ignorant.
Well, yeah, you and I would differ on what's ignorance and educated. I can see that, but
no, I happen to think
I
that you're
can't
very
complain
educated.
if it's there and they see what they're buying, and I think that would be a step in the right direction. But as Senator Exon has pointed out, whereby the primary movers here in this particular regard are not looking for legislation or regulations, that's our function. And to be perfectly candid with you, I would look for regulations, some kind of legislation, if it could be constitutionally accomplished, unless, of course, we have these initiatives from the industry itself. And I think your suggestion is a good one, that they print those words. That would go a long way to satisfying everyone's objections, I think.
All we have to do is find out how it's going to be paid for.
Good enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawkins.
Say you have 4 children?
Yes.
Say you have 4 children?
Yes.
Pardon me?
4 children.
4 children. Have you ever purchased toys for those children?
No, my wife does.
Well, I might tell you that if you were to go in a toy store, which is very educational for fathers, by the way, it's not a maternal responsibility to buy toys for children, that you may look on the box, and the box says this is suitable for 5 to 7 years of age, or 8 to 15, or 15 and above, to give you some guidance for a toy for a child. Do you object to that?
In a way, I do, because that means that somebody in an office someplace is making a decision about how smart my child is.
I'd be interested to see what toys your kids ever had.
Why would you be interested?
Just as a point of interest in this.
Well, come on over to the house. I'll show them to you. Really?
I might do that. Have you ever do you make a profit from sales of rock records?
Yes.
So you do make a profit from
Yes.
sales of rock records?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think that statement tells the story to this committee. Thank you.
Mr. Zappa, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next witness is John Denver.
We haven't gotten much on this one. Hey, you got bail by the tail here, huh? See? We've had SDI hearings and mocked up the HEW bill. Since 11:30, and you just get the third witness. No, let it out.
I haven't listened to too much of it, but it seems like the majority is otherwise. I think that the oral atmosphere developing in this particular hearing that the committee's on trial and make darn sure we don't do nothing ought to transmit rather back to the original problem. Filth, pornography, suicide, all this other stuff coming out of these records. Now, the other gentleman, Zappa, said, print the words. I rather like that. Since I wouldn't have to read it. He would read it one way, obviously, and I would read it differently. And there is that human error involved. Do you have any recommendation for the committee other than just do nothing? I mean, you've talked in beautiful terms. You're the best I've seen on peace and the family. I'm not speaking facetiously, and the family and the responsibility and the wonderful human nature, and I'm with you on the stars. We're both supporters of Cousteau, and I've authored in this particular committee the oceanography programs. Barring all of that, are you saying do nothing?
No, sir, I'm not saying do nothing, and that is exactly why I'm here and why I applaud this hearing and applaud what these ladies, what the PMRC has presented to us.
Well, I think we've got to be sensible about it, but there is, like you say, particularly with at least the radio and TV, I can't read the words coming there. I can see that difference between Mr. Zappa and myself. If persons of free volition can go in and read the language and see the words there, I wouldn't have to read it. But then, to not have some inhibition, some kind of discipline, as you describe it, within the broadcast media, then we've flunked the course, because there are 6 hours of that thing steaming and beaming into the homes.
Well, you know, Senator, excuse me if I'm interrupting.
No, sir, not. I'm trying to...
When I was raised, television was just coming out, and golly, it was an attractive medium, and I could sit there in front of that TV set and watch it all day. My parents had some restrictions on how much time I could watch television during the week, especially when I was going to school, and I could choose the programs that I wanted to watch. And I think that this is kind of an influence that we can exercise as parents on our children. Just because it's on 7 hours doesn't mean our kids are going to get to sit there and watch it that whole time. And we can give them a certain amount of time, and over here for me, you know, one of the things that I'm fortunate with is my children and I live in a beautiful country, and we have a lot of activities which really call us outdoors, call us together and away from the boob tube. No, I don't watch very much television. And I think that we can exercise this kind of influence on our children, even in a city environment.
You and I are different. I mean, you and I are the same. We don't watch. I don't watch that much television, obviously, but the record is otherwise. They watch in television as much as instruction in the classroom in the public schools and more. All surveys show that, so it's being watched. So that's the fact. And living in the real world, where you and I would like to restrict our children, or me, my grandchildren now, it's a real problem. It's a real problem, and I guess you know from being a master at the art, the way you start off selling that record is get it accepted at some good programming, some good broadcasting, and then the sales follow. And you can't print those words ahead of time, so I'll know to cut the television off quick or whatever it is, unless that discipline develops, in other words, with the broadcast media. We are going to be forced somewhere with regulations through the FCC or otherwise. I don't think the American public is going to go along just with a nice hearing up in Washington today. I think there's going to have to be something more developed of some kind of discipline, as you indicate, and I'm trying to find out from you, how do you develop that discipline a little bit better than what has been developed?
Well, I think that you know, a good beginning to addressing this real problem is this hearing that is taking place. What most concerns me, aside from potential legislation which might be enacted, which we have said which we've heard today is not going to be the case, is that the whole presentation made by the PMRC comes from, in my experience, a foundation of fear. The only thing we have to fear, as President Roosevelt said, is fear itself. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of what my children might see. I'm not afraid of anything that might be shown them or done in their presence that would lessen my influence on them or their opportunity to grow up and be fine, upstanding adults and perhaps someday serve in this very august body.
Well, most respectfully, President Roosevelt never heard these records.
Senator Gore.
I think the things that he heard were far worse, sir.
Senator Gore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be able to ask some questions. I've been a fan for a long time, Mr. Denver, and not only of your music, but also of your contributions to efforts like Farm Aid at the present time, and also world peace and your trips to the Soviet Union and elsewhere. Do you see the kind of trend in some rock music that is outlined by this presentation? Have you ever been to a Motley Crue concert, for example?
No, sir.
Do you agree that there does seem to be a growing trend in the, at least in the heavy metal area, that emphasizes explicit violence and sex and sadomasochism and the rest? You're aware of that music, aren't you?
Yes.
Why do you think that has been growing in popularity?
Again, sir, my experience, not only in this country but all over the world, is that music today is the medium which most specifically tells us what's going on in young people's minds. Not what's being put into them, but what reflects what they're interested in. I think that this addresses itself to a much graver problem, in fact, the source of the symptom that we're discussing here today.
Well, I mean, if a 10-year-old listens to a song glorifying rape, that's not reflecting what is in that 10-year-old's mind, is it?
I don't think so. I'm not sure that there are many 10-year-olds who know what rape is. Well, I'm not sure I would agree with that. If you have an explicit description of a suicide, for example, and a song that seems to glorify and promote suicide, that's not. I mean, young people are aware of that. Mr. Gore, Senator, excuse me for interrupting. Sure. If I could count the number of times that a mother or father has come up to me, or a child has come up to me and says, if I don't get your autograph, my mother's going to kill me. If I don't get your autograph, my daughter's going to kill me. Yeah. You know, well, you see a difference, this is a part of our language, and there might be a slight difference, but I don't think it's as big as you point out. You know, the way this video that we watched here today, I think is probably a fantasy that every kid has about his father at some point in time. It may not be exactly those particular graphics. It may be out in the farm, being able to take your dad out and put a board to his fanny. But this goes on. This is a part of growing up, and our society has gotten increasingly complex. There are many more images to reach from. They all have an impact on a child's mind, and I'm saying that the small percentage of records that we're discussing here today, compared to the 125,000 songs that are released every year, is minuscule and is not going to affect our children to a degree that we need be fearful of. We need to be conscious of it, we must concern ourselves, and we need to communicate with our children and have them feel comfortable with communicating with us. Well, let me come back to the question about suicide. Let's say you have a popular rock star who has a lot of fans, who sings a song that says suicide is the solution, and appears in fan magazines with a gun barrel
pointed in his mouth and promotes material that seems to glorify suicide. Here we have one of the highest rates of teen suicide of any country in the world. The rate has gone up 300% in the last decade among young people, while it's remained constant among adults. Do you think it's a responsible act for a record company to put out a song glorifying suicide and for the artist to promote the album by putting a gun in his mouth in a suicidal, in a simulation of suicide?
I would not like to be the one to tell a record company or an artist what to do. I certainly think the picture that you describe is deplorable, and if I found that in my home, I would talk to my kids about it and get rid of it.
Could I just interrupt? It's my understanding that you have to leave. Is that correct? Or you're under strict
Senator, I
time
appreciate
constraints?
that. Yes, I have an appointment with NASA at noon, and if it's possible, I would like to go to that, but I also really appreciate being able to discuss this with you all, and I'm happy to stay if I can handle that.
Let me ask if are there any more questions?
Mr. Chairman, I will stop my questions at this point and wish Mr. Denver good luck in getting on the space shuttle.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Senator Exon has a question, and I think Senator Pressler does.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for being here.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate your testimony. I don't know you, but although it may lead to the beginning of the end of your career, I like your music. In fact, I think I know you. I think a friend of yours, Rainbow Terrain, has talked about you. She's an art instructor and a friend of my wife's, and I kind of think I know her through you. Just one basic question. Please clarify for us, what is your opinion to the key question that's been asked time and time again here, and you've alluded to it. Are you for the printing of material on labels? Are you for or against, or are you for or against any kind of a rating as long as it's done voluntarily between the record companies and the producers? That's my key question, and I would simply say one more time, which I said every time I've had this microphone this morning. I think it's wrong to imply that although no bills have introduced, bills might not be introduced, and I want to hold that threat for what it's worth over the head of trying to accomplish some free enterprise volunteerism that most people have agreed to. What do you think about a free enterprise volunteerism getting together and either printing or coming up with a rating program of some kind that would be prominently displayed on records?
I'm opposed as an artist. I'm opposed to any kind of a rating system, voluntary or otherwise. Putting the lyrics on the sleeve of an album or on the jacket of an album is no problem for me. Again, I think it goes beyond reading the word, and I bring up again the song Rocky Mountain High. You know, some people, high is high, and high is getting stoned, and high is a feeling of elation, a celebration in life. As I told the people in the Soviet Union when I had the privilege of singing for them there, I sang Rocky Mountain High, and then I described what high meant to me, and then I said to them, that's how I feel having the privilege of singing for you. That is how I feel having the opportunity to participate in my government here today.
Thank you, Mr. Denver. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pressler?
Like I said, ties in with my question. Your basic line is that you're against any type of government action in this area, or indeed any voluntary labeling.
I would be, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
John, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience for waiting so long.
Thank you, Senator. Great privilege to be with you all.
Thank you.